Okay, in this short video, I'd like to go over the materials list with you. I try to do this as comprehensively as possible, but if you have any questions about the materials list, just go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to clarify it. So when you open your list, you'll see it looks something like this. And at the top part here are the places you can get the materials. So the number one place of choice would be the bookstore here at KCC. You can order them online, or you can pick them up in store, or you can order them on the phone, however you want to do it. They prefer that you do it online, and here's the URL to get there. However, they don't have everything listed online that, well, at least they didn't last semester, so it might be easier to try online first or try with a phone call, and if they don't have everything, then you can just show up, no problem. Other two choices here on the island would be the UH bookstore. Make sure they're open, and then Hawaiian Graphics on Beretania. KCC will be the cheapest, okay? Hawaiian Graphics will be more expensive, but you can get student discounts if you show a student ID. But even with the discount, I'm not sure it's going to be as cheap as KCC. Ben Franklin's is by far the most expensive place to buy art materials on the island, so I highly want to dissuade you from going there to buy things unless you need one or two things very quickly. But if you're going to do the bulk of your shopping, certainly don't do it at Ben Franklin's. Another option you have is online. Online is really good because if you have a certain amount, it's more than $45, you'll get free shipping, even to Hawaii, or the shipping is incredibly reasonable, $10 to $15 compared to the price savings you're also going to have. So that $10 or $15 will easily be offset by the fact that things are much cheaper on the mainland. So if you have Amazon Prime, for instance, there's no shipping. Dick Blick, Cheap Joe. So there's lots of options online. And this is by no means a definitive list. Anything you find or have access to, please feel free to go ahead and make use of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through this list. You don't need everything on the list. The things that are marked with an asterisk, you'll see right here, these are the things we need by the beginning of the second week. You might even want to get them in the first, make sure you have them in the first week. So I've given you plenty of time, usually about a couple of weeks to get your materials, even if you order them from the mainland. Okay, so the first part of the list is looking at brushes. Now, if you have brushes already, maybe you've done some painting, and there are people in our course that are taking this class for the second time or third time, or they're more advanced painters. We do have a thing at KCC where people can take the class even if they've already had it and do independent study work. Or maybe you just have your own brushes lying around the house anyway. If you do, I'm not necessarily requiring that you buy any brushes, but I need to have a look at what you have. So take pictures or organize a video conference, and I can have a look at what you have and tell you whether they're suitable or not. But what I have here is just a beginner's list. The whole thing is really a base beginner's list of materials you need for this class. You can easily build on it. You can always add stuff, more colors, more brushes. But if you have these basics, you're good to go. So basically, for this class, we're going to use two types of brushes, flats and rounds. Flats are these kind of squared off. Rounds are these pointy ones. Rounds make lines. Flat brushes make flat, broad areas of color and shape. There are many, many types of brush heads, filberts and brights and fans and all sorts of things. It can get really, really confusing. So in my list, I'm just paring it down to two basics. The flat and the round. So don't worry about all the other types. You can tell oil and acrylic, but we're using oil in this class, brushes, by the length of the handle. If it has a short handle, it usually means they're watercolor brushes. So make sure you have a long handle. And then within the world of brushes, there are two main types. There's this type called nylon, and then this type called bristle. It might not always be the color, but you can tell by the touch. If you feel these, they're very coarse and rough. And if you feel these, they're very smooth. So what happens with bristle brushes, and they come from hog's bristle, is that the mark of the brush is very visible. So because these are stiff and coarse, they gouge into the paint, and you can see the brush marks a lot. With the nylon, they're very soft. It's still stiff, but the bristle itself is a smooth bristle. So it allows you to blend much more smoothly. You can blend smoothly with these. It just takes a little more time and a little more skill. And you can be painterly with these, meaning you see the brush strokes and the marks. Um, so if you have to make a choice between the two, I would recommend maybe starting with a nylon because our first painting has a lot of smooth blending. But if you want to, just use bristle or you have bristle already, that's perfectly fine also. Okay, so again, like I say, if you have any questions on the brushes, just shoot me an email, send photographs, or we can set up a video conference. And so what I have listed here are 2 flats and 2 rounds. Okay, so your choice, depending on what they have. And notice that one of them, we have an asterisk, so we need a flat brush to immediately start the course. I also have a 2-inch house painting brush. This is something you get from a hardware store. Now, I'll talk about this later. You will have a couple of choices to make on your list in terms of how you want to proceed. And if you go one way, you need the brush, and if you go another way, you don't need this brush. So I'll come to that later in the presentation. Okay, when it comes to paints, we're working with oils, and the brand that we have at KCC is called Graham, M. Graham and Son, and we have a set of paints that are the regular size, and then we have one tube, which is the white, which is the larger size. All right. So this set right here is a basic beginner's set. I'll talk a lot about color and color theory in the course and explain why I've chosen these colors. But what's most important to remember is that your brand, in this case Graham, is not that important. You can get any brand you want. What is important is you get these pigments. So you'll notice that there's no red here. There's a cadmium red light and there's a alizarin crimson. Those are our reds. But you don't see anything called just red or just blue, and that's because in painting, the type of red, the type of blue, and the type of yellow are very, very specific, and they're distinguished by their pigment. So these are the names of the pigments that we're using. So regardless of what type of paint you get in terms of brand or where you go to buy them, take this list and make sure you get these pigment names. If they don't have the pigment name, ask the store attendant for something very, very similar. If they don't have anything similar, don't get it. Order it online, or if you have to break down and go to Ben Franklin's and buy one tube, go for it. But don't get substitutes that aren't similar. If you do have to break down and go to Ben Franklin's ever, the cadmiums, cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, and cadmium yellow, avoid because they're so expensive. So for instance, the cadmium red light at KCC bookstore is about $13, and that's our most expensive tube of paint. At Ben Franklin's, it's $33. Okay, so you might want to break down once in a while if you have to for Ben Franklin's, but don't break down for cadmiums unless you can afford it, because they're very expensive. There are 2 general types of paints. There are artist quality and there are student quality. Student quality are cheaper. They're fine for this course, although if you can afford it, I would recommend you go for artist quality. Because artist quality are just as they sound. They're higher quality pigments, higher quantity ratio of pigment to filler, which in this case is oil. So when it comes to mixing and combining colors, you actually use a lot less and the colors are richer. So in the end, you might end up, if you buy student paints, using twice as much paint. So there goes the cost right there. So try to purchase artist quality. M. Graham is artist quality. Now, how do you tell the difference between artist quality and student quality? Unfortunately, stores will not label them student quality. Because they think, well, no one's going to buy them if they're considered student grade rather than artist grade. So the best way to tell the difference is if you go into an art store and all of your oil paints are the same price, they're student quality. If each tube is a different price, they're artist quality. And that's because the price is related to the pigment, which is the actual color of the paint. So try to get artist quality if you can, but if your budget is such that it's a bit of a stretch right now, student quality would be fine. Make sure they're oil, and make sure your white tube is larger than the other tubes. We use a lot of white in this course. Okay, canvas. So we have a choice. One of the choices you're going to make is whether to work on a pre-made canvas. So these are canvases that are pre-built. You can see the wooden frame, and then there's canvas stretched around it, and then that canvas is painted white with an acrylic gesso or primer. Now, normally in a regular face-to-face class, we make our own canvases, and there's a demonstration on how to do it, and you're required to do it. But because this is an online format, you have the option of just buying them already made. You have two choices. You can buy them already made, or you can make your own. So I'll go through the pre-made first. We're going to use 4 canvases during the course. The first one is approximately this size. Second one is approximately that size. I say approximately because if you go to the art store, you might find, oh, there's no 20 by 24, but there's a 20 by 26. Or maybe there's a 22 by 24. As long as you're close to this number, you're fine. Try not to go smaller, though. The smaller your canvas, the harder it is to paint, believe it or not. Okay, our second one you'll see is bigger. Again, approximately. And the third and fourth are going to be based on your choice, and I'll talk about that later in the course. So just hold off. They're going to be either this size or bigger. All right. The advantage of the pre-made canvas is you don't have to make it. It's already made. The disadvantage is they cost more. Okay, now this pre-made canvases is the one exception I'll make for Ben Franklin's. I'm sorry if I'm harping on Ben Franklin's, and I hope nobody works at Ben Franklin's who's taken the class. I mean no disrespect. You're just expensive. Except for pre-made canvases. For some reason, Ben Franklin's has had a sale on pre-made canvases for the last 20 years. And that is a 40% off sale. So in terms of economics, buying the pre-made canvas in Ben Franklin's is actually an economical choice. So that is one choice you have. The other choice is you can make your own. All right, and if you make your own, these are the materials you need right here. So you'll need your stretcher bars, which make the frame. You'll need your canvas, which is what you stretch, and you're going to need a staple gun. So you can see it's a lot more materials. The staple gun, if you're taking this class once and you're not a painter, you might not want to do this because the staple gun is an investment. And though putting these together is relatively cheap, when you compare it to the pre-made Ben Franklin sale and not having to buy a staple gun, it's much cheaper probably to go this way. So it's your choice as to how you want to go. If you do want to do this and make your own canvas, I will have a video and a demo on how to do that in the course. And then the canvas is ordered from the KCC bookstore. You'll need 5 feet of 54-inch unprimed canvas. Now, unprimed means there's no gesso on it. There's no white paint already on the canvas. Sometimes when you buy canvas, it comes that way. One side is already primed. For this course, if you're going to make your own, make sure you don't have any primer on the canvas. It is just raw cotton, medium weight canvas. And we have that at KCC bookstore. All right. Moving down to the miscellaneous part of the list, we're going to need some blue painter's tape. But this you'll find in hardware stores, but I think they also have it at KCC bookstore. In fact, I'm pretty sure they do if you want to also get it there. Terpenoids. This is what we use to clean the brushes and dilute the paint. Now we're working with oil-based paints, so you cannot use water. Water will not clean your brushes or dilute the paint. This is a turpentine substitute. So turpentine is the traditional solvent for painters historically. Turpentine, unfortunately, is toxic to women who are pregnant. And the fumes are very, very strong. And in the classroom, we are not allowed to use this. Because this is an online class, if you have turpentine, you're working from home, you can, by all means, you can use turpentine. But it's much more expensive. And like I said, if to the unborn fetus, it's dangerous. So we use this turpentine substitute. It's odorless, it's economical, it's good. Now, you could go to a hardware store and buy mineral spirits, other kinds of solvents. I wouldn't recommend that. They're not refined. They're not as high quality. This is a higher quality, what they're called petroleum distillates. So, you get the cheaper stuff. What can happen is sometimes on dark colors, like dark blues and greens, you could see a kind of hazy, waxy, blurry residue that appears on the paint, which is just from the white spirits evaporating. Whereas this is much more refined, you won't get that. Now, when you buy this, what I want you to avoid is the Terpenoid, which is the brand, the Weber's Terpenoid, uh, the green one, the sustainable one, the eco-friendly one. Do not get the natural one. Now, it's not because being natural is bad, it's because for some reason the formula that goes into making this, because it's different, it can be temperamental. What I mean by that is sometimes it's kind of sticky or clumpy, or it just acts weird and strange and can get in the way and cause more problems with painting. And what I'm trying to do is just take away all the problems so we can just focus on the act of painting and not get too specific on the materials. So I've chosen materials that are good, basic, and straightforward. And like I say, you might use this and all of a sudden it starts to get sticky and clumpy. It might not. Some batches are good, some batches are not so good. Again, if you're working at home, it's up to you. You could use this, and if it doesn't work, just throw it out and get another one. But if we're working in the studios at KCC, our paints are recycled. I mean, our solvents are recycled, so we have a community batch, so you would not be allowed to use this in the community batch. But at home, it's your choice, but I recommend not using it. Use this at home. Now, it is flammable, but the flash point's very high. I mean, it's not like you're going to be smoking or throwing lighters in it, but just a note about working at home. Just make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area, and that, when you're done using your Terpenoid and your paints, you're putting the tops back on your jars. You're going to pour this into a jar, and I'll talk about all of this in the first week of class, so don't worry too much. Okay, the second choice you have to make is when we do small studies, we're not working on our canvases, we're doing smaller, quicker studies. You're either going to do it on canvas panels or chipboard. All right. So chipboard is large boards, usually 36 by 28 inches. It's compressed cardboard. And what we do is we take these, we paint them white with something called gesso, and we give it 2 coats, and then we cut them. And those gives us small little rectangular squares that we can work on. The quicker way, but it's slightly more expensive, is canvas panels. These are canvas that have been stretched around this stuff, already primed and already cut to the size. So these are no fuss. Open the packet and you're ready to go. And these you have to prepare and make. Again, these are cheaper to go that way. These can be a little more pricey, but again, it depends on where you get your materials and how much space and time you have in terms of preparing things. So I'll go back over your 2 choices at the end of this presentation so you can see. If you do go this route, remember you have to have gesso, so there's an extra ingredient you have to buy for this. Again, I'll cover that in a second. Liquid. With oil painting, we have something called mediums. Mediums can be very confusing to a beginning painter. I've simplified the whole medium thing for this course by reducing it to 1 medium, and that medium is called Liquid by Winsor & Newton. So you're going to need a bottle of this. Don't worry about how it works. I'll explain that throughout the course. You'll also notice I've skipped right here. You need 2 jars with lids. This is how you can clean your brushes and recycle your solvent. And you're going to need assorted cotton rags, old t-shirts, old bed linens. Cotton's best. It's absorbent, better than sort of nylon or satin. Don't use paper towels. Paper towels fall apart and they cause a mess. So try and find some old t-shirts or bed linens. You'll also need a palette. This is something we mix our paints on. Okay, you can buy the traditional artist palette, wood or plastic or vinyl or glass, or it doesn't matter what you use. Or you can buy palette paper, which is really just wax paper, but wax paper in sheets. So this is disposable. You open the pad, you work on it, you tear it off, you throw it away, and there's the next layer. Or you can use a plate or a board. You can use anything you want as long as it's flat and as long as it's not absorbent. Okay, so if you have a piece of wood, you can paint it with paint. If you use a primer or oil-based primer, it'll seal it. or you can wrap wax paper around it and tape it on. It's entirely up to you. So you can be very inventive and creative with your palette. The only thing you need to avoid is this kind of palette. This is for water-based, and in this particular case, maybe ink. So these are little troughs that hold the water. We don't want this. We want big areas to be able to mix out from our central mixtures. So don't get something like this. And then finally, so I've got masonite board here too. That's if you want to tape your panels down to a board when you're doing studies. And usually that'll be maybe for your chipboard. So if you go that route, you want the masonite board. If you go canvas panels, you don't necessarily need it, but it's optional. I'll talk about that in a second. Palette knives, some people like to mix their paints with palette knives. I don't. I don't encourage it. It has there's lots of reasons for that, which I won't get into right now. But if you see some palette knives and you want to try it, by all means, go for it. And I apply that really to all materials. If you're in the art store and you see something that looks cool or interesting, get it, try it, see how it works. The trick here is finding what works for you, and you'll only do that by experimenting. However, my list, like I said, I pared it down to basics. From that, you can build on it by adding stuff to see what you like or what works best for you. Okay, so like I said, you have two choices. When it comes to what we do in the class, we have two sets of projects. One is our actual paintings, our canvases, and the other one are our studies, smaller works. So for the paintings, you can either go pre-made or you can make your own. So in terms of the list, if you go pre-made, you would get these right here, but you would not purchase this. Okay? Alternatively, if you are going to make your own canvas, it's the opposite. You would purchase these materials, but you would not purchase these. Okay, so pretty obvious, but I just thought I'd spell it out for you. The second choice is canvas panels or chipboard. This is a little more complicated in terms of the list, so I've drawn it up this way. If you go the canvas panel route, you just purchase the canvas panels, but you do not buy the chipboard, you do not buy the gesso. You also don't need the 2-inch house painting brush. Now, sometimes the canvas panels, if they're really, really cheap, avoid them because the gesso that's on them is not very good. And so some people, when they buy canvas panels, they like to add gesso anyway. Gesso is what we add to our chipboard. So you would end up buying the gesso and buying this brush. But for our purposes, I wouldn't worry about it. You also don't need the masonite board because these are pretty sturdy. But it's optional. The masonite board is a large board that you tape your panels to and then work on them and then take the tape off. But canvas panels are pretty sturdy and people just use them by themselves, but it's entirely up to you whether you want to get the masonite board. The other choice is to go the chipboard route, and if you do that, then you don't need the canvas panels, but you will need chipboard, you will need gesso, and you will need a 2-inch brush to spread the gesso. And I'll talk about that in the class, how to go about doing that. And then the masonite board to tape your chipboard down. The chipboard does tend to bend a little bit because it's thinner, hence we like to use a board to back it and tape our chipboard to the masonite board. These are large sheets, so what you would do is you would paint them and then you have to cut them, and you would do that with a Stanley knife and a ruler, utility knife. And again, it's a little more complicated, which is why many people just go the canvas panel route. Okay, so I hope that hasn't been too confusing. Materials are kind of a little intimidating and overwhelming at first, especially with oil painting. But just know that there's a lot of materials and there's a financial outlay, but oil painting is much easier than the other types of painting. Because oil dries so slowly, we have a lot of freedom. It's a lot of forgiveness. We can blend, we can take a break, we can come back and blend some more. We don't like it, we can wipe it off. But if you go watercolor or acrylic, those paints dry almost instantly. And so what you do, you have to do very quickly and very well. And if you don't, then you end up layering paint or it starts to look muddy. And it's very, very hard to learn how to paint with watercolors or even acrylics. Oil painting is the easiest, but it does have this huge list attached to it. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, email or video conference, and I can sort them out for you.